So thanks again for joining us for today's webinar on malware, which is brought to you by cybersecurity expert SonicWall and Dynamic Business, a publication which has kept small businesses informed for more than 20 years. I'm James Harkness, the editor for Dynamic Business and your host, and I'm joined today by Brook Chelmo, who is SonicWall's ransomware Tsar. Today, Brook will be looking at the significant IT security risk of malware, including ransomware, and what you can do to protect your business, because let's face it, if you're hit with ransomware, the biggest cost won't necessarily be the ransom demanded by attackers. More likely, it'll be the business disruption, the downtime and the revenue loss while efforts are made to retrieve or restore business-critical data. Brook will also discuss what SonicWall will do, or did, to prevent Petya and WannaCry ransomware variants, which dominated the global headlines this year, from infecting client systems and networks. Now, before I pass over to Brook, I'm just going to give a bit of his background. Fascinated by growth of consumer internet, Brook dabbled in grey hat hacking in the mid to late 90s while working and volunteering for non-profit organizations. After spending the better part of a decade adventuring and supporting organizations around the globe, he ventured into the evolving world of storage and security. Today, he serves humanity by teaching security best practices and promoting and developing technology. Now, if you have any questions for Brook throughout the webinar, please type them into the question box and not the chat box. At the conclusion of his presentation, Brook will have an opportunity to answer a few of your questions. Over to you, Brook.
Thank you, James. So today we'll talk about the basics of ransomware, kind of a ransomware 101. We're going to assume you have some functional knowledge. We'll talk about the latest infamous attack we politely call not Petya, which looked like Petya originally. We're talking about how we stopped it, and then of course how to prevent new infections. In the case of WannaCry, we're able to block that 3 weeks in advance. But what about version 2, 3, 17, 18? So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll leave you with a long list of good best practices that you can follow up with when it comes to securing your organization from ransomware and other variants and forms of malware. So as you know, ransomware is everywhere. It's in the news all the time. It's targeting large organizations, healthcare, government, finance, entertainment, specifically gambling. Anyone who deals with money, publicly traded, people who are under highly compliant standards, because if you can exfiltrate their data, you can bribe them into not releasing it because they will incur greater penalties from their government. Dun, dun, dun. Transportation gets hit. Ransomware is basically this. It's a form of malware, typically a Trojan, that will get into an organization and encrypt the contents of a drive, an entire network, and then hold those points hostage, hoping for you to value the data that you have on that PC. In the case of my PC, which is about 5 feet from me right now, you can hack that, exfiltrate the data. It's worth nothing. Maybe the reports are worth $5 to my competitor, but nonetheless, it's worth so much more to me. People who are in creative services, who are creating things, their time is and energy is put into these things. That's worth a lot to them. So ransomware makes us value the data that we actually have, and we're able to put that into a price based on Bitcoin. But we're not going to really focus on Bitcoins and things so much. We're going to focus about the material impact. And I'll give you one good example. In April, there was, I'm going to say, a good employee, 6:30 in the morning, James, opened up an email that said, this is an unpaid invoice. It's like the Prince of Nigeria scam of 2016. We saw this so much in the beginning of the year. And so this is an unpaid invoice. This dutiful, good employee at 6:30, who checks email at 6:30 in the morning? This person did. Opened the email, trying to be a good employee, ransomware. It locked up the accounts payable system. It locked up the email system, and believe it or not, locked up the phone system for 2 weeks. Now, you and I would prefer to have no email or phone for 2 weeks, but you tell it to the board of directors. That being said, they couldn't collect payments for 2 weeks. The total material impact cost them $2.4 million. So you can focus on the $25,000 they actually gave to the hackers, which is a little bit more than 1%, where for 98-point-something% of that was based in crisis mitigation and everything else. So that being said, it causes a severe impact because it does more than just infiltrate an organization and exfiltrate data. It's encrypting, it's locking up drives. It takes a lot of work to recover from a massive attack. So with that being said, people will ask, how does it get into my organization? Let me ask you this question. What percent of ransomware attacks happen through phishing emails? Dramatic pause. Now, I ask people that question, and they always say 90%. It's not that big. Email security vendors will tell you it's that big, but it's not. It's roughly 65% of ransomware attacks coming through phishing emails. The other 35% or so is found on on web pages, where web pages are taken over. A lot of clickbait on the side of articles. You know, if you read a news article, they don't always vet what gets put there. Compromised websites are put there. There's a lot of clickbait stuff that does that too. But so it comes in through phishing emails and compromised websites, and you do get a bit of exploit kits here if they're wide open. But generally, once they get into an organization through those first two methods, they now try to map network drives and spread throughout an organization. So that's pretty much how it's working. In the case of Petya, which is the more recent form of infamous malware, they took the exact same business model as WannaCry and applied it with devastating consequences. By the way, WannaCry, Petya should have all been avoided by simply doing one thing: patching the SMB vulnerability within Windows. Windows issued that critical notification months before the attack, and people still didn't patch. WannaCry should have woke people up and said, it's time to patch this. They did not. Not Petya, whatever you want to call this variant, this wiper, this ransomware, should not have happened. As a result, Mondelez reported a 3% loss in Q2 sales due to shipping and invoice problems, and Reklet Van Kiezer blames $177 million loss in revenue growth on Petya. Now, those numbers may be a little bit high because they have cybersecurity insurance, James. They may try to, fudge the numbers a little bit here. But even if it's $17 million, that's still a pretty big impact. So with that being said, here's how it works. This is the same thing as WannaCry, Petya, whatever. You can rip the name off that yellow cylinder and change it to whatever you want to call it. We call it Petya originally because it used a lot of the same code as Petya, which was the #2 ransomware last year. It was definitely under the radar for a lot of people. Locky was #1 last year. Cerber was pretty big last year in terms of because of how powerful it is, but Petya was actually #2. In the case of, so they borrowed a lot of the code from there, and so, but we call it not Petya because it's not exactly what that is. So that being said, you can rip and replace that. And just like we call this a malware cocktail, you're taking a ransomware variant, we're strapping it to a worm to go after a pinpointed vulnerability we call Eternal Blue. Supposedly developed by the NSA in my country of the United States. So unconfirmed, but let's live as if that is the truth. At the end of the day, we want to focus on data privacy and data security. It doesn't matter what your nationality is. We need to keep data secure and private, no matter who wants to view it. If they want to view it, they need to have a subpoena. Am I correct? So here's how it works. It gets into an organization. It infiltrates patient 0, the first person, first system to get it. It will now probe local networks to see where it can go, and then encrypts itself on the way out. As a result, leaving behind a nice ransomware message, which doesn't work. You can't pay. You can pay them if you want to. You could in the original moments, but you can't even pay them anymore. You can't get your data back. You cannot get your data back from WannaCry. You cannot get your data back from Petya. There's a lot of them that will claim that you will, but over half of malware ransomware variants do not give you back your data. It's a 50-50 chance. But here's the good news. Let's forget about paying these people. Let's forget about what we do when we get infected at this time. We still have to prepare that, but let's talk about how we prevent it. In the case of WannaCry, we were able to block that over 3 weeks ahead of time. We had access to the Eternal Blue vulnerability the same time the shadow brokers released it. I don't know how, I don't know where, but we had access to it. We're able to then examine it, able to dissect it, and create 7 different definitions so that if it ever did get into your organization or anybody doing any form of malware tried to exploit this, they couldn't. Secondly, we blocked the ransomware variant called WannaCry in the case of the Wanna attack, WannaCrypt, Wanna whatever. We're able to block that as well. It's all about knowing what's out there, creating definitions for that. We have people that work around the world. We have sensors located around the world. And we'll talk about the volume of malware in just a minute. But we're always working around the clock to try to find a way to stop new versions. We're looking for it all the time. Furthermore, we're able to stop communication with command and control servers where a lot of these payloads are downloaded from. We'd like to talk about ransomware, and we want to treat it as a separate class of malware. Kind of is, but in reality, what is it? It's a Trojan. This has been around for 30 years, 25 years. It's a Trojan. It's trying to download a payload from somewhere else. It comes in as a normally benign file and downloads later. We want to stop the communication with that command and control server where the payload comes from. We can do that. Not only that, but we can also decrypt any encrypted traffic coming into your network. Let me ask you the question. What % of malware is encrypted today? Think about that for just a moment. So when it comes to managing web and device traffic, we're going to focus today a little bit on the web traffic and how we're going to stop ransomware coming through here. So on the left of the screen is kind of a story diagram I like to use and try to run with. This helps people understand how the technology works, broken apart from just the firewall itself. On the right side of the screen are different certifications for the firewall, for our SSL VPN, and of course certifications for our gateway security. So with that being said, NSS Labs recommended us for the last 5 years in a row. That's for the firewall. And of course, we'll talk about some of these other little awards on the side here. But take a look at that content filtering there at the top. What is that? Content filtering is a way to stop good people from going to bad places. Was the employee who opened the phishing email at BWL a bad employee? I highly doubt it. That person was working early in the morning. They already got their coffee. They got rid of all the morning gossip, and they were checking email at 6:30 in the morning. Not a lot of us do that. Hats off to that person for trying to do such a good job. But we need to stop people from going to bad places. And we use content filtering as a way of doing that. We can block malicious sites. I'll talk more about content filtering in a little bit later. Gateway security has that botnet filtering that stops communication with command and control servers. So you understand that part. We want to stop good people from going to bad places. Secondly, we need to decrypt all encrypted traffic coming into the network. Here's a question. What % of malware is encrypted today? Tick, tick, tick. Over 50% of malware today is encrypted. These are not future statistics. I go to lots of security presentations. I go to a lot of security shows. I read security news every single day, even on vacation. I tweet about it. You can hit me up on Twitter at Brook Chelmo is a place to talk more about this, and where I share a lot of this news. And here's the one thing I always catch. Here's the trend. They'll try to get you to buy something for future statistics. In the year 2026, there'll be 60 billion IoT devices, and those are going to melt your face and leave your children orphaned on the street. So buy my product. So we're not talking about future statistics here. We're talking about statistics today. Over half of malware is encrypted. Over half. Over 62%, roughly 62% of all sessions coming into your network will be encrypted. Plus or minus, depending on your organization. You need to decrypt that data so your firewall can examine it to see what it can do. What you know about that file. Gateway security will now tell you what it knows. Is it on a white list? Is it on a black list? A lot of the malware needs to be scrubbed in that way. But the question is, we discovered so many new forms of malware. If you don't know it, you can't catalog it. You can't create definitions for it. So how do you manage that? That's where the network security network sandbox comes into play here, where you can take an isolated environment to blow up suspicious code. Go back to the right side of your screen. Right there, the thing called the CRN Product of the Year 2016 by customer demand, that was won by the network sandbox being 4 months old. Product of the Year being 4 months old, unseating competitors for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. On the left, I put a bronze award on the slide. Nobody puts a bronze award on the slide. Why? Because the customer will say, "Ooh, won silver and gold. I want to know who that person is." You can do that. That's fine. Go talk to people who won silver and gold. There's probably be silver and gold for us next year. But the reason why I put that on the screen is the network sandbox won bronze award being 2 months old, 4 months old, around that time frame. Keep in mind this, we won several other platinums and golds as well from InfoSecurity, but I put the bronze one on the screen because I'm proud of that network sandbox. And I'm going to tell you why, because it's going to change the game of how malware is found and processed. This is going to change the game, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. Furthermore, we use client antivirus. You must have an endpoint strategy. This is enforced antivirus, meaning that no one who has this client on their PC or whatever isn't able to access the internet unless that is up to date. Boom. It's very important to have that. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit here about the threat landscape. By the way, if you have any questions, please type those into the question box, and James will be fielding those at the end of the webcast. So that being said, you need to have a global view of the threat landscape. Anybody, anywhere can create a firewall. Congratulations, here's a firewall, a glorified router if you want to call it, but you have to have a global view of the threat landscape so you can stop the things that we know about, okay? We work with over 50 organizations around the world to share threat data. We have over 1 million sensors located around the world to find that. This is why we responded to, cataloged, and prevented 60 million new forms of malware last year alone. And believe it or not, guys, it was a drop from the year before that. 64 the year before that. We had a dramatic rise. It was like 27 in 2014, I believe. So we're seeing an explosive amount of malware, a slight bit of a drop because of ransomware. But nonetheless, we need to have this global view. It's being made all the time. A lot of us want to point our finger at Russia or the Ukraine or China and say, oh, that's where all the evil people live and they're creating all the malware. I have news for you. The #1 place for hackers is the United States of America. So with that being said, hackers are located around the world because it takes money, it takes resources, it takes people with education to do this. Malware is not easy. That's why I dabbled in the 90s and I no longer do it today. I don't have the ability or time to do it or the resources. So that being said, you need to have a global view of the threat landscape, and we also need to leverage machine learning. We do not have 60 million employees to delve into the code that we find every single year, all the malicious code. We use a deep learning algorithm, machine learning based algorithm, so we're able to process all this new stuff, trying to stop as much malware as we can to pull the DNA out of the code, to try to see what we know about it so that you don't have to deal with this stuff, okay? We're able to classify this as malware and block it if we don't know what it is. If it passes through gateway security, then we use that network sandbox to process it. If it's good, it goes to the network. If it's bad, it gets fed back into our team and to our machine learning to ensure that we get better all the time. And believe it or not, we're finding more and more malware all the time using this technique. So just to kind of cover a few of the steps that we covered before, like I mentioned before, leverage content filtering to stop people from going to places they don't belong. You can use content filtering to block Facebook in the office if you want to. You can use it to enforce the safe search on YouTube, so people can't Google maybe a few nefarious things on YouTube. that only quote unquote adults should view. Of course, you can also throttle bandwidth. So if YouTube is taking over your office bandwidth, I worked for a company of 20,000 employees, and we downloaded 3 terabytes of YouTube video a day. So you could throttle the bandwidth on those applications if you want to. But nonetheless, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. But if you have this, use it to block malicious links. Use that as a basic minimum. You can go an extra step, which is going to be in the best practices. You can use this to stop people from going to places from an unknown location. People will say, oh, I'm going to turn off access to Russian sites or locations. You can try that. Only dumb hackers will try to broadcast themselves from places like that. Now, a lot of people try to ping themselves off many different places so that they can't be found. In many cases, they come from unknown locations. So you can do that as well. So again, you must decrypt the data coming into your network. What percent of malware is encrypted? Over half. What percent of sessions are encrypted? 62%. It's right there on the screen. If you do not have the ability to decrypt data, you might as well take your firewall and cut it in half, because you're only going to be able to see half, if less than half, of the traffic coming into your network. Let me repeat that again. You must decrypt your data for examination. Otherwise, it's like immigration at an airport that randomly picks people to look at their passport once half through. With that being said, use a SonicWall modern appliance. There's a lot of older devices that are still out there, and they do a great job. But here's the news. The Generation 6 appliances, the new stuff we have out here today, it's been around for a couple of years, is great at SSL decryption, and it's free of charge. On the older devices, you can have SSL decryption, but of course it's a service because of the support. But on the modern Generation 6, we have decided to not charge for that. We want everybody to use it because over half of malware is encrypted. 62% of sessions are encrypted and growing. Again, today's statistics, not future statistics. And here's the fun, let me give you kind of a bit of anecdotal evidence here about decryption. It takes a lot of compute power when handling anything to do with cryptography. I was on the team at this large security firm that handled encryption for Facebook. When they migrated from 1024 to 2048 bits of security, you're doubling the security bits, they had to quadruple the servers required to handle cryptography. So it takes a lot of power. We've designed these things years ago when we first started to build these things to handle SSL or TLS decryption so you can examine this traffic rapidly. The supermassives can handle like close to 1 million, if not more, concurrent sessions of encrypted traffic. With that being said, you also on these appliances, this Generation 6 appliance, have the ability to run Capture ATP, the network sandbox, which we'll talk more about in a minute. So again, if you have an older appliance, talk to your partner and say, well, tell me about the Customer Advantage Program. Write that on your hand. Customer Advantage Program. This is going to help you trade in a competitive device, an old device. If it's just a gerbil and a wheel that could process network data, we'll trade that into. Just tell us what it is. We'll help you figure out a deal with great discounts to get you onto these appliances. It's very important you have modern network security for the modern age. With that being said, now that the firewall has examined all the traffic, we want to apply a black and a white list to what we know. Okay? Stop the known threats with a gateway security. Gateway security is this big bundle of things. It includes a thing called botnet filtering. Botnet filtering is stopping command and control servers, like I mentioned before. We want to stop people from going to places they don't belong. We want to stop people from downloading things they shouldn't download. That's what botnet filtering is for. Application control is in there too. This is going to stop your applications from being hijacked. You have a lot of things you can do here as well. There's some DLP functions, data loss prevention functions in there as well. We have intrusion prevention system, IPS. This is what we use to stop WannaCry and Petya, the eternal blue exploit worms from spreading through an organization. That's where that comes into play. Then we use gateway antivirus to stop known forms of malware. Collectively, this is called GAP IPS. We block 2.6 trillion with a T IPS attacks and 7.2 billion malware attacks. Here's a factoid about SonicWall. We don't have 7.2 billion customers. That's a lot of malware attacks per customer system. We don't have 2.6 trillion customers. We don't have 2.6 billion customers. Nobody does. That's a lot of IPS attacks happening all the time. Firewalls have been designed to do this for years, and we're the best at it. With that being said, we blocked 638 million ransomware attacks last year. We don't have 638 million customers. Nobody does. That's a lot of ransomware attacks per customer system. The closest competitor to us blocked 4,000 ransomware attempts a day. We blew that out of the water. 20 times that. There's so much malware that we're stopping. 630 million last year. This year is going to be very similar, especially with WannaCry and not Petya. In terms of the statistics, we didn't get a lot of ransomware hits, but we got a heck of a lot of IPS hits because it would try to get into an organization and try to spread. And we're blocking it, blocking it, blocking it, blocking it, no matter how many times they try. So that being said, now we know about all these malware, right? We knew of 60 million that we cataloged last year. That's 114 in it. That's 2, 4, 6, 8 in that sentence alone. So how do we handle all the new stuff? And that is why we use a network sandbox called Capture ATP. This is a multi-engine sandbox. Well, let me take a step back. What is a sandbox? Sandbox, it's an isolated environment where you can blow up suspicious code. Why do it in your environment? Do it in our environment, see what it does. And because malware is so sophisticated today, it's really designed to evade so many different things. So you need to work with a vendor that can handle this, who has anti-VM detection technology, who can forward time to 400 days or more to try to stop malware that has timing delays baked in. So if you take a look, by the way, of that image on the right side of the screen, see all the stuff that's in kind of that sea green? That's the stuff we just talked about. That's stopping all the stuff we know about, URL filtering, intrusion prevention, blah, 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 blah. The sandbox is now how we find the stuff we don't know about. Now, I invite you to go read Gartner's report on network sandboxing, specifically the one that they released in 2015, maybe early 2016, before we were out in the market with this. They're quite bearish, to use a Wall Street term. They said because the ability to evade a network sandbox is rated at about a medium, you should deploy 2 sandboxes from 2 different vendors. Is that a good choice? Would you want 2 antivirus clients on your endpoint? No, you don't. We're talking about network slowness, building up fortifications. It really hurt access in this case, especially if you have 2 people doing the same thing. So that being said, we developed a multi-engine sandbox that can do the work of 3 sandboxes using a multitude of technologies and ways of scrubbing out threats. Not only this, it's the first that's multi-engine that can also block until you have a verdict, which means you're going to take that suspicious file and hold it at the gateway until you know exactly what it is. So with that being said, we have the rapid deployment of threat intelligence. To our friends here in Australia, you can open up a file today. If someone in Melbourne opened that, or New Zealand, or Tokyo, or Singapore, or Kuala Lumpur, they open that file before you do and have it examined. That verdict remains indefinitely within our system with the hash. So that if you upload that same file, it's going to come back with a verdict. So you don't have to process that within milliseconds. That is how cool this stuff works. With that being said, it's on the TZ300 through the Supermassive 9800. But let me explain to you a little bit more in detail of how it actually works. So imagine if you like to play tennis, okay? And you wake up the next day and your wrist is just sore. It hurts so bad. You can't bend it. You don't know what happened. You don't remember falling down. But you go to the doctor and you say, what is wrong with my wrist? And she looks at it, does a visual examination. She then orders up an X-ray to take a look at the bones, and then an MRI to see what's happening in the tissue and the vascular level. Now, in this medical example, it's going to be expensive and timely, and it also happens in sequence. In the case of what we're doing with malware, we're doing this in parallel at the exact same time in a very cost-effective way. And by the way, as customers don't have to pay for individual processing, you just pay one flat fee a month for this type of service that will run all the suspicious code in an isolated environment. And we're doing this with virtualized sandboxing on the left, hypervisor level analysis, which is like an X-ray, looking at the memory of a system. And then we're also using full system emulation, because why? We want to see what code wants to do in all the different layers and behaviors that we see here. The first place malware goes is to the memory of a system. That's why we use hypervisor level analysis. Try to stop it before it can get anywhere else. We use full system emulation because ultimately together, when you bring this all together, you can see what code wants to do from the application, down to the operating system, down to the software that resides on the hardware. So if it's easy to evade one, try evading three. And so it's really tough to do. So we're really enjoying this. This is why it won the Sierra NetSec Product of the Year last year. This is why being 2 months or 4 months, whatever it was on the market, won bronze for InfoSec Product Guide. We hope to go for silver, whatever the top gold, magical platinum award they have for these things. But nonetheless, you don't have to look at awards to realize you have something killer here. This is finding so much more malware than anything else out there today. Let me show you how this works. Here's a reporting screen. This is one of our internal accounts, so it's not going to look like yours. We find a lot of malware because we pull down from a lot of suspicious places and pull down some benign files as well, just to kind of, like white zip or whatever, just to try to, make sure we don't get any false positives, and ultimately just go after ourselves all the time to improve ourselves. You go down there, you click on a report. You see a screenshot here, but the report goes much longer, deeper if you want that level of detail. But what I like to do is click that XML file on the right side of the screen and also click the screenshots, which you get from a couple of engines. Take a look at this. This is a thing called Cerber ransomware. It's beautiful code. If you don't have anybody to keep you warm at night, Cerber will. If you don't have anyone to bake you bread and make you breakfast in the morning, I think Cerber will. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's powerful. It's wonderful code. And a lot of articles have been written about it, but it doesn't get a lot of attention because it hasn't been going viral like the others have. But take a look at this on the left. How many evasion tactics do you see there listed? 7. All designed to get around Windows, network security, and sandboxes. Look at that last one, timing detection. That's a sandbox trick. This is what shows the power of SonicWall's Capture ATP. Go to my competitors and say, show me an example of Cerber in one of your reports. Good luck. Very few can. I've been challenging vendors to do this for 6 months. No one has shown me a report yet. I'm picking a fight here. Take a look at the right. That is a screenshot that came from the reporting as well. That is what CRBR looks like. That's what Cerber looks like. This is Cerber. It's beautiful code, and it's powerful stuff. And this is what your endpoint would look like had you not had this level of protection. It's powerful stuff, but we're able to catch it because we're using multi-engine sandboxing. You turn on that block until verdict, until we can give you a chance to do this. And we're always improving, we're always changing. We're getting so excited about this. We just released 6.2.6 operating system for SonicWall. We have added the RAR support, the 7Z support, a lot of different file formats, changes, abilities to detect and examine PDFs, changes in how we process documents. There's a lot of different things we're doing, and we're still going, and we want your feedback. But if you want this, if you want to take a look at how we're stopping malware today, specifically ransomware today, take a look at this option here. One, we have content filtering. That's to stop good people from going to bad places. All right, we're going to stop that. You can use it in a school if you want to. It's great for schools. It's great for kids. You can use this in your home. By the way, you can, if you want to actually view something that you've blocked, say violence. You want to watch Game of Thrones, but you don't want your kids to watch Game of Thrones. You can put in a password to override it. Just don't make the password Game of Thrones, okay? Gav IPS. We want to stop the stuff we know about, and then we use capture ATP to stop the things we don't know about. By the way, it comes with 24/7 24/7 support around the world. So, and since then, since SonicWall has left Dell and become an independent company since October, we've really focused on the support level too. We have added a support center in Ottawa. We've reduced call drops by over 70%. And we're driving harder all the time to train our employees on the technology, and of course to train our customers, and of course with 100% channel fulfillment, with the regional support and support from the partners as well. If you go with SonicWall, you will be a happy person. So with that being said, I invite you to look up Advanced Gateway Security Suite. If you have an older device, we have trade-in programs that include this as well, 2 or 3 year options. So you have one price, one expiration date, and one thing to focus on for all your network security needs. So this is all, of course, the capture ATP story I just told you about is on the firewall. We've now added that to email security. And since then, we've seen a large rise in documents. It's probably the #1 attachment you see in emails today, PDFs and Office documents. The other day I checked, we had over 52 Office documents come through with new malware that we've never seen before. 40% of those were caught by our email security team and the email security capture ATP. We're going to be adding capture pretty soon to the SMA product line as well. And we're going to work on a master license, so you get one license for all 3. So use email security. 65% of phishing attempts come through there. Use the firewall to strip down that traffic. Over half of malware is encrypted today. And use the SSL VPN to control applications, users, and devices who want to have access to your network. This is how you prevent IoT attacks and DDoS attacks using IoT devices. So that being said, it's also an email as well. And this has been winning awards as well. So what I'd like to leave you with here at this point is a good list of best practices. And then we're going to go over to our Q&A here. But just to show this to you, I'm not going to read through all of this. I'm not going to go through all these things here. You can do a screenshot, print screen. If you're in a double screen, there's different ways of doing that too. But take a screenshot, take a picture, whatever. And I'll try to leave this up here for just a second. But here are some good ways you can also prevent ransomware. If you go to your favorite search engine and search SonicWall prevent ransomware, there's a long KB article that includes a lot of these steps as well, written by a friend of mine, Rob Krug, and you can see a lot of those things there as well. But the big one, of course, is just stopping known and unknown threats. With that being said, James, what do we have for our Q&A?
Well, just while we're waiting for some more questions to filter in, I thought I might put a question to you myself, Brook. I'm curious, touching on ransomware attacks, and I guess the attackers demand Bitcoin. To minimize the downtime in the event of a ransomware attack, should businesses keep a supply of Bitcoins? Would you recommend that, or is that kind of a gray area or even a black area?
We've seen this in the UK. I mean, because if people do that, I'm not going to tell you. There was a recent article. I think one firm stockpiled like 150, 170,000 US dollars worth of Bitcoin. That could work, but for, one, if you have a hard time getting it and expensing it, to meet some type of deadline from the hackers, you could. Generally, it's a really tough one because a lot of it's like you're assuming you're going to fail. And also the way Bitcoin is up and down, it could be a good deal because if you buy it low and you can sell it high, the company can make money on that. But generally, I don't really focus on the material impact like that ransomware has in terms of the actual Bitcoin. I want to take a look at what's happening, the overall strategy. So I would say if you have money to spare, put it into awareness training and put it into security instead of putting it into remediation. That's like buying fire extinguishers, but never teaching your children to not play with matches. So with that being said, I would say, yeah, in this, by the way, it's a 50-50 chance you'll get your data back anyways. So that people are trying to exploit Eternal Blue all the time. It's just the way the world works. I opened up the captures report last week. I opened up the first 10 files to examine what we found, 6 of which included ransomware, all of which were trying to exploit Eternal Blue. All different variants, everyone's trying it. So with that being said, focus on the awareness education, focus on the security part, and always, always back up your data.
So I guess from that, it's the message would be not to necessarily take a defeatist view to cybersecurity, but to be more proactive in how you apply your funding, whatever's available in your business. Look, I've just got a question here, Brook, from Tim, who's asking if there are any Australian distributors for SonicWall.
Yes, absolutely. There's a large, large bit of support here within Australia and New Zealand as well, in multiple cities. So that being said, here's what I recommend doing to help find the distributor that's the best. Go to our website. Go to SonicWall.com. Download something. Yeah, and leave your contact information, your accurate contact information, and you'll be contacted very soon by the appropriate distributor that serves your area.
Here's another one from Jackie who asks, is it pointless to pay the ransom? I know you mentioned, Brook, it's kind of a 50-50 chance, but she says, is it pointless to pay the ransom? What if getting their data back up and running will take too long?
Well, yeah. So of course, just because you pay that doesn't mean it's automatically you'll get the encryption key. It's a 50-50 chance you'll get data within any period of time. A lot of the Bitcoin wallets and a lot of the places where you can pay them are being taken down. So even if the attack successfully launches, they may not be successfully paid. It also encourages them. It's just like if you feed a stray cat, it'll keep coming back. And the same way too is how you were hit doesn't mean you were targeted. A lot of people say, well, I'm too small to be targeted. At the end of the day, what are you? You're a digital citizen with an IP address and an email address. And those exist in databases everywhere. That's why you get spam. It's not because they know you, it's because you are you. You exist. You're a digital citizen. So with that being said, I say don't pay. Have good backups. And yes, they may take time, but what it takes to do that is worth the time and effort. And if we collectively as a whole stop paying for ransom, I will stop being the ransomware czar. I don't have to focus on it anymore. I don't have to sleep, breathe, and hear about ransomware anymore. We'll focus on other problems.
Look, here's another question, Brook, from Stuart, who says, maybe this is a bit cynical, but you can have the best cybersecurity platform in the world, but people can still let ransomware into the business by opening a dodgy email. How do you address the human problem?
Yeah, so it's all about awareness education. Like I mentioned, I'll give you a good example. I almost fell victim to one myself. I have to assume it was ransomware, but I knew it was a malicious link afterwards. Here's the deal. I'm in Sydney today. This is my 20th flight in the last 5 weeks. I received an email after booking a flight on Cathay Pacific, code share with American. It said, "Hi, your credit card's been charged $243. Click the link to find out why." Most people say, "I never booked that flight. Let me check that out." I looked at it. I usually don't check those things because, expense reporting systems, blah, blah, blah. But I saw it. It looked right, but also looked wrong. It's like, something was, it was like having a crush on your cousin. It just didn't feel right. And it had the American Airlines logo on it. There was a domain listed in the email that was accurate. It was aa.com, something. It looks just like a system-generated URL for this type of thing. I hovered my mouse over it, and sure enough, below was a very different email address. I didn't click it. I'm assuming content filtering is going to block this if I was on a SonicWall network. And it was on a private PC, doesn't have a client. I would assume it could be a number of things here, but so awareness education helped me and saved me in this case. But how many emails do you receive a day? 80, 100, sometimes 200, a lot. So when you're a busy person, especially if you come back from vacation, from holiday, you get a lot of email and you want to go through that quickly. And sometimes these things shock you, trick you. The unpaid invoice scam was very successful. You have a package scam, click this URL is very successful. Your credit card's been charged has been very successful. These things happen, and good people fall for phishing attempts all the time. With that being said, awareness education is very important. The security angles are very important as well. And backup. And I forgot to mention, patch your systems and backup again.
Amidst all of your insights, you spoke about stray cats and cousins and Game of Thrones, but you gave some very robust information about what SonicWall is doing, and I guess this is an evolving landscape of cybersecurity, but as you said, it's better to be focused on what's happening now instead of what's coming down the line, solely focused on that. Did you have any final insights that you wanted to share about what you're doing with SonicWall and how you're addressing malware and ransomware?
The big part I'd say is just stay up to date. And at the end of the day, you don't have to be a security expert, right? This is why we outsource expertise to people. I brushed my teeth this morning with a toothbrush that would take me 100 years to create myself, right? Do I try to do that? No. I outsource the creation of toothbrushes to a toothbrush company. It would take me 100 years to develop a formula that was competent to the toothpaste formula that I used this morning. There's a reason why we do this. So we rely on people who are experts at what they do. SonicWall has been in business for 25 years. We've been cataloging threats, hardcore since 1999, before the dot-com days, the crash, you could say. Back when malware was cataloged in the thousands, if not hundreds back then. But now we live in a world where there's millions of forms of malware. People are using all sorts of different techniques. So that being said, stay up to date, to kind of get an idea of the threat landscape, but do your best, to focus on what's good and help leave the security to us. But learn, use best practices, and just focus on what you do best, and try to avoid putting out fires by being proactive.
So you can just see up on screen Brook's contact details. More details about SonicWall. There's the number, the website, and an email that you can contact. Look, thank you for your time, Brook. Thanks for sharing all of your insights and what you're doing with SonicWall. For those who want to revisit Brook's insights and his presentation, the webinar will become available on Dynamic Business very shortly this week, and we'll be emailing the direct link to all attendees. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Brook, for being here with us, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you very much.